Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, we're continuing on with Minnesota Vikings training camp. The Vikings have had some interesting news headlines in the last week or so. One of them just about gave us a heart attack with Justin Jefferson suffering an injury. If you haven't seen, it was not a serious injury, but for about 15 to 20 minutes there.
It looked and sounded like a collarbone.
Yeah, it didn't look good. So everyone had a minor panic attack for about 15 minutes or so, and we'll discuss that and kind of what we learned as a result of that injury, where that panic came from. Also, Kirk Cousins continues to remain in the news. Something of note, we've been kind of paying attention to the way that he's performed since returning, and there has been some kind of interesting developments that we're going to talk about with Cousins in terms of just inconsistency and just an overall change in kind of personality to a degree that have been reported from Vikings training camp. So we'll talk about that a little bit because it seems to be somewhat noteworthy here. In addition to that here, we've got just some final other notes. Of course, Christian Darrisaw lingering injury and the impact that's having. So we'll touch on all of those things and anything else that comes up here. So that is the game plan for today here. Of course, like I said at the top here, the big news is Justin Jefferson and the reported AC joint sprain, which now let me walk you through kind of what Vikings Twitter looked like if you weren't online for the moment that this occurred, right? So 99% of us that follow the Vikings hard are not standing there on the sideline at training camp right now. Of course, that's, reserved just for the reporters for the most part. So we're basically feeding off of, 3 or 4 Twitter updates that come all in a row. And then, small.
It's amazing how quickly that permeates through the internet, right?
Right. And so the initial announcement, right, with Justin Jefferson was that he came down hard on his shoulder and that he wasn't moving. Now, if you've seen the video since then, that's exactly what happened. Jefferson essentially went up for a ball. He came down awkwardly on that shoulder, and he was in significant pain. Right. Exactly. So what ultimately happened here is your mind goes to collarbone, like Drew said before. Everyone freaks out and thinks collarbone. There's also the clavicle in there, which is substantial time and requires surgery as well. And of course, being Vikings fans, nobody even thought, might just be a shoulder sprain. Might be. I don't think anyone would have pinpointed AC joint, but it might just be a shoulder sprain. Nope.
A medical expert may have pinpointed it.
Yeah, and I think a couple of them did. But all the Twitter doctors out there in Minnesota were ready to panic, and rightfully so, right? So Jefferson ultimately comes back mostly unscathed from this issue. The result, though, where that panic came from, everyone's thinking, okay, Justin Jefferson goes down, we're in major trouble. Well, why are you in major trouble? You've got Adam Thielen. You just drafted a rookie receiver from Iowa that you like in Smith Marset. You've got a couple of other guys. Yeah, BC Johnson just went down with an ACL, but you've got D.D. Westbrook coming up. You've got to like some of these rookie undrafted guys that have been making plays in training camp as well. So where's the panic come from? Why was everyone freaking out?
I think, number one, it's just Justin Jefferson's really good, and not having him
that's the
available.
Answer, yeah.
That's the number one. But I think the next level of that is, at least and if you've been listening to the show, you know how much I've been preaching wide receiver depth. And they finally signed D.D. Westbrook, which was a solid move, especially for the vet minimum. But there's still you still think about the scenario where Jefferson and or Thielen not available for a game. I don't like where the Vikings are left there. And so, because then you have Chad Beebe, you have D.D. Westbrook, and then you have your Smith Marset maybe. It's a kind of a, and do you trust those guys to carry the weight and be available for Kirk Cousins when it's needed on 3rd and 7? I don't, and that's where, at least for me, from a football sense, obviously I panicked for the sake of Justin Jefferson's health, and also for fantasy owners that might have him from a dynasty league or something like that. But that was for me. Like, I think it's still concerning the fact that wide receiver depth is an issue, and even the signing of Westbrook for me didn't okay, we're fine with an injury, we're okay. Like, that was not what I thought right off the bat there. So it's still concerning to me that there's a depth problem, and I need someone to step up in camp and show me that they can be a reliable option there to solidify that depth that is still concerning to me.
So this is really the big kind of major takeaway, right? Is I think despite the fact that he was so good as a rookie, and despite the fact that Vikings fans as a whole are in love with Justin Jefferson and in love with the potential that he has to be a Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver for this organization for a long time, I think we still somehow underestimated how valuable he is to this team, right? Because you think about in your mind, you've got 1A, 1B in Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. That was kind of that's been the take. This kind of injury and the reaction from it suggests to me that pretty much everyone is on board with Justin Jefferson as the true number one at this point. If you lose Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver depth chart looks a whole lot different. Just it falls apart completely because all of a sudden that it creeps into your mind. Oh, Adam Thielen's on the wrong side of 30. Oh, Adam Thielen.
Well, he is banged up himself right now.
Exactly.
Too,
right.
So.
Hasn't been fully healthy for what better part of the last 2 years now. Like there's real question marks if you lose Justin Jefferson. It's not just that he's becoming one of the best receivers in the league. It's not just that he's extremely likable and everyone enjoys his personality and what he brings to the organization culture-wise. It's the fact that without Justin Jefferson, this wide receiver depth chart goes from looking very, very good, one of the strongest in the league, to straight up shitty, like not good, like a high impact position that's not going to be good. Adam Thielen's ultimately going to get double covered. I mean, how much confidence can you really have in KJ Osborne to be your number two, despite having a strong camp? I think he's making a case to be, the next guy.
Sounds like he's getting a lot of reps with, your
that's the other side team, of this now,
which
too.
And that's maybe the guy. I've heard good things about Blake Prohl. Is that his name? Blake Prohl.
Yeah.
As well. He's flashed a little bit. So again, I haven't been to camp. This is merely reading from people and listening to people that have been there and that I would trust their opinion on things. But those are the two guys that have stepped up. Now, again, we can see preseason games where that would be the next step, would be seeing how they perform in game action.
Yeah, absolutely. So, they're going to have the opportunity here in the preseason, and we're going to get to see a lot of different combinations here. Sorry, my dog is going crazy here. It's my dad's dog, actually, so blame my dad's dog. Anyway, so the wide receiver position, this is kind of a good thing, right? Like Jefferson being hurt, never going to be excited about that. Always a bad thing. Injuries suck. Good news is that it's not that serious. It's not I guess it could potentially linger, but this is not a career like throughout your career.
It sounds like he'll be fully ready to go week one.
This isn't something to worry about long-term is what I'm trying to say here. Now, what this means is that other players are going to get Justin Jefferson's time at training camp. And while I do think that Justin Jefferson could benefit from his second, really his first full year of training camp as a starter, I think he could benefit from those reps. But I think it's fair to say that KJ Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, Blake Prohl, Whop Filer's had a couple of hilariously great plays that just came out of nowhere. D.D. Westbrook, of course, is going to need to get time eventually to become more accustomed to the offense. You have more snaps available now. So to a degree, because Jefferson's going to be fine and because
that's
he's
the silver lining.
1 or 2. Yeah, that is the silver lining here. But you have the opportunity to get a better look at some of these guys, and maybe the opinion isn't so grim by the end of this training camp if you could see, hey, does KJ Osborne's route running, or improved route running, I should say, and ability to make catches in traffic, does that translate to the preseason? I don't know if it translates to the regular season. Let's find out if it translates to the preseason first. You might have a bona fide number 3 here. This is a guy that's you might, and you could say the same
because he didn't really get a chance at wide receiver last year. He was special teams guy only.
Yeah. So it's an interesting scenario that the Vikings have kind of cooked up for themselves. But it's just so funny that the second a guy, a household name, if you will, gets hurt, we all think it's going to end up like Teddy Bridgewater at this point. I expected ACL. Just when I heard he fell on the ground. Of course, we find out that it's a shoulder, but then you expect broken collarbone, broken clavicle, or whatever.
That's what we're trained as Vikings fans to think.
To be. Yeah, it's too bad. But
I will say Zimmer said, what did Zimmer say today? He went to the podium and made the joke. He said Jefferson's injury is certainly not a tweak. That he'll be back soon, referring to his comment last year when he called Hunter's injury a tweak that forced him to miss the whole season. So it sounds like It shouldn't be that big a deal. It should be back week 1, no problem. Probably could play week 3, that kind of quote unquote dress rehearsal game, but I would be surprised if they put him out there for that.
Yeah, he shouldn't see any preseason action. Just get ready for week 1 at this point. I mean, we know what he can do. Like I just said, it's good that it would be nice to have him get those reps. Probably don't need him. And I am interested at this point because with BC Johnson gone, it's so much more opened up now. Like if Jefferson goes down and BC Johnson is still on the field, well, he slots in right away at your number 2 wide receiver. He starts getting the reps immediately. But because he's gone now, all of a sudden you just got question marks across the board. I mean, is it Chesna or Chesna? He's getting reps now. I will never say his last name right. I've said it wrong for 2 years now. Yeah, it's just Dan. Is Dan getting more reps now? Yes, I think he is. And, you look at just across the board here, you're going to find out a lot about your wide receiver group over the 4 weeks of preseason now because all of a sudden you don't have to cater to either of your top 2 receivers. So it's probably going to be interesting, and there's probably going to be a fair amount of screw-ups, but it's something to keep an eye on now, especially with that wide receiver depth chart opening up and more positions becoming available due to injuries and otherwise. So with that being said, like you said, let's close that out here with the silver lining once again. Justin Jefferson is fully expected to be fully healthy. This is not going to be a long-term issue, and we can all breathe a sigh of relief. Now, moving on here, other reasons for concern. Now, this Kirk Cousins thing generally probably wouldn't be worth talking about on a podcast, right? It's minor news. And I'm referencing what Courtney Cronin shared in one of her recent tweets about kind of analyzing training camp. And she made mention of just the kind of the way that Cousins has played since missing 4 practices following the COVID-19 situation, ordeal, whatever you want to call it. Now Cousins seems to be just a little bit off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's what Cronin said word for word is, to be frank, his performance has been up and down. Cousins said he's never missed 4 straight days of practice. So some of that probably factors into the mistimed and overthrown passes we saw Saturday and the 2 interceptions from Thursday. He's appeared visibly frustrated at times also, which is something we don't see too often from Cousins. So a couple of things different there. Now it's one thing, I'm sure, getting into a rhythm, throwing to new receivers. I'm not going to be that worried about the mistimed and overthrown passes. Like that'll probably happen when you're trying to get acclimated with new people. But maybe we're totally overthinking this and overreacting to it. But to me, what's rattling is the visibly frustrated part that he's never really been that guy most of the time. He's more, when he's it's poor performance, but it's not like he's getting super animated about it. So the fact that that's a noteworthy thing, and Courtney Cronin is as trustworthy as anybody when it comes to Vikings news and information. So that's something that, maybe it's just a result of missing a bunch of practices, but
I kind of honed in on that same piece, right? The visibly frustrated part, because if you think back to this guy's entire career, he's had a lot of different obstacles. One thing we don't give him credit enough for is just the adversity that he's faced throughout his career and his ability to overcome. And I mean, he's not supposed to be starting quarterback in the NFL. Mind you, this is the same guy who was drafted by the same team in the same draft as Robert Griffin III. He was never supposed to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. We probably don't give him enough credit for that. But my point being here is that through all of it, every piece, I mean, pretty much a class act, right? A little bit boring, in my opinion, a bit of a boner, but he is nevertheless very low key, level headed, keeps the kind of the right mind frame that you need to have for, a league where you're going to lose sometimes, but you need to win as much as possible. I think he's got the mental makeup to do all these things. So when you see the term visibly frustrated associated with a player who has never shown any signs of visible frustration, despite having numerous occasions to be visibly frustrated, in my personal opinion, I mean, right from draft night, I would have been pissed if I'm Kirk Cousins. What is the team thinking drafting me? I'm trying to be a starter in the NFL, and you've just got your guy for the next, in theory, 20 years. Obviously, it didn't work out that way, but this guy could have been visibly frustrated from the day he was drafted, and we've never heard of that before. So I have questions. I mean, is this just natural. The fact that he wasn't practicing for 4 days, and just inherently he's not going to play maybe as consistently or as well as he personally would like, and that amounts to visible frustration. Maybe it's that simple. What I'm concerned about is that this onslaught of people, myself included to a degree, yelling at him to get vaccinated for the best, the best result for this team, is seeping into his mind. And now he's mad at everyone for being mad at him.
See, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. Okay. I think he's so far tuned out of social media stuff. There's just no way he's even looking at any of that. Now, it's possible that maybe there's teammates saying something to him, coaches saying something to him directly, and maybe that's Mike
Zimmer.
Now, if fans, he doesn't care what we think or any of the fans think, to be honest. You like or hate him, I don't think he cares. But now, if it's something internal where it's a teammate or a coach getting on him about it, then maybe that could be it. Now, again, we're overanalyzing something probably, and there's a lot of questions we're not going to have answers to, but these are just merely theories here. And it's just, I just hope, everything is good with these guys going into the season, where chemistry's fine and they can gel on the field, and this stuff's not an issue. I just hope that it's not something that bleeds into the season.
So the thing with football, and for everyone that's been watching this for many years like myself, that they're never actually going to say what they feel. 99 times out of 100, you're not going to get the true sentiment from the player answering the question, right? They're going to do something to dodge it. They're going to blame it on something else. They're going to put it somewhere else. You're not going to get the true answer. You can't walk up to Kirk Cousins and say, "Hey, I thought you were visibly frustrated today. What was that from?" He's not going to tell you exactly why. Like, he's going to have a better answer for that because he's been trained to do press conferences all his life. So we're never going to know the answer. And that's why this type of thing is concerning, because all you can judge it from is body language, right? And so generally speaking, like, if you think about the times when you were, think about the last time you were mad, when you were really pissed off, your significant other did something, your brother did something, whoever it was really teed you off. You're completely irrational, right? You don't always think super well. Mm-hmm. You don't think intelligently, and you absolutely don't tell the person who pissed you off what's bothering you until they dig it out of you most of the time. So we're never going to know, but the way that you react in that situation and the way that you are acting, you can tell immediately that you're pissed off. So it's like, you can't just shake this and be like, yeah, I was mad because I overcooked the meatloaf last night in my ridiculous ass, mm-hmm. machine in my backyard that looks like it's from space. You can say that, Kirk, but I'm still curious. Like, I think this type of situation would weigh on a quarterback. I think this type of situation would weigh on a regular person. And I'm curious, like, I know you don't care about the fans. I don't blame you for not, because we're irrational. We're stupid. We say dumb stuff all the time, and we make fun of literally all the players on our team, regardless of how much we love them. I wouldn't listen to us either. But I would listen to my friends, family, coaching staff, boss, the owners of the organization. It would make me nervous on a daily basis. So I'm curious about this. I want to know, is this a one-time thing, or is this something that's going to carry on?
We're not going to get answers from, because, well, I should say, the first presser Kirk had after all of this, he was actually weirdly
visibly
outspoken about things and kind of agitated and things. So I don't know. I mean, I
don't think there's anything to it either. I think he's just pissed off in the moment.
Yeah. Well, and to a degree, I think there's something to be said about, you get on a team with people, and when it's competition time, I think people kind of set aside differences, and it kind of, things gel better than usual. So I think when it's time, I think it'll be better. But it's something to at least monitor that, hey, maybe everything's not so smooth in that locker room, and maybe that's part of it, is these protocols and the decisions players are making on those.
I mean, it's a polarizing situation, right? It's a polarizing world right now, and it's really no different, especially when, 72% of your team is vaccinated. That means that there's over a quarter of your team thinks that it's bogus.
No,
I
it's
mean,
like it's like 65% is only, and it's like
so
I mean, lowest rate in the league.
1/3 of your team thinks it's bogus, and 2/3 of it are yelling and screaming, saying that this is going to save lives and you need to do this. Like, I can't imagine.
I mean,
Even
purely from a football sense, I mean, it's subjectively like fact. It's a fact. You have an advantage.
yeah,
If the whole team is facts based on the protocols.
so and the NFL wants it that way. That's why they set it up this way. Like, you can be mad at the NFL, the players are, but like they set it up with this intention, like to piss you off, so that you look at the rules and you're like, ah, shit, you know what? I got to go get vaccinated. Like, this is how it's going to be. So, it's an interesting situation. And again, like I said at the top of the segment, like, I don't think typically we talk about this. It's just that we're in that lull of training camp where things are happening, but nothing's happening at the same time. And when your quarterback is
it's
different
one thing,
than
right?
usual,
I mean, that, and if we were there, like, it's one thing. We used to be able to go to camp and see the practices and stuff and give our own reports. We're still kind of eyeing what other people see, So we kind of have to, we're working with what we have, I guess.
Right. This is secondhand news. Keep that in mind as well. So, that seems like enough for Kirk Cousins for this show. Let's talk about what the kind of the lingering things going on at training camp here. I want to start with Christian Darrisaw because we've touched on him a couple of times, and obviously being your first round pick, there's just inherent, implications, and people have expectations of you. And one of them is that you're healthy. Lingering injury for Christian Darrisaw. This is making me nervous at this point. Like, normally lingering injuries are something to be nervous about, period. But when it's a rookie, you don't know how he responds. He doesn't know the playbook. He's not getting any reps in practice. I mean, we might not see this guy this year. It's making me nervous.
Well, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion, but with, I think you see Zimmer sort of coming out, the frustrated Zimmer with the injuries come out where, he probably shouldn't be like upset at a player for being hurt, but he does that sometimes where he kind of has that tone in the press conferences where he's like,
we've talked about this
trying to hint at it, like, oh, why are you hurt? Because he said something like, well, it's one step forward and two step back, and kind of gave this tone like, oh, it's time to be done being hurt, but I don't know the situation here. I think there maybe was a surgery or something that didn't go quite as smoothly with him, but obviously when you first round pick, you invest that into a guy. I would hope the health part is looked at and everything. And so it sucks. But on the positive side, again, as same thing with receiver, you kind of go in there, you can see how other players are performing in certain roles. So now you have, Rashad Hill in there at left tackle. And we should probably talk about Olu Udo being essentially apparently just doing really well, getting that guard look. But yeah, it's Darrisaw. You want the guy out there, but it sounds like it's an uphill climb at this point to be there regular season.
Yeah, it makes it that much tougher being hurt as a rookie. I mean, we saw what happened with Garrett Bradbury getting hurt going into his second year. It's even harder getting hurt in your freshman year in the NFL because straight up, I mean, you're trying to learn so much, and at the same time, you're trying to get healthy. Like, you want to focus on one thing, and that makes this very challenging. And I think it's probably too early to say, hey, this guy's not going to play. But I don't, accounting for the way Mike Zimmer deals with rookies, he's probably not starting until week 4, no matter what. And now this, I mean, I think this. I don't think we're going to see Christian Darrisaw in a game time situation, barring injury, until probably week 6 to week 8. That's the way that this is going for me right now. And it's not a result of the injury so much as it is he can't be coached as a result. And like you said, Mike Zimmer's pissed. Like, you could tell.
Yeah, like he's obviously he's pissed. He can't really direct it at.
It's not fair to be pissed, but like, he's mad at the world basically. But it sounds like he's mad at
also it's probably a little bit bleeding in from last year, dealing with all the injuries that took place, last year, and then all of a sudden it's already seeping into this year with both Jefferson and Darrisaw, and then all the COVID stuff with the quarterbacks. Like, it's probably Mike Zimmer can never just have like a normal year of coaching. So he's trying to put all those pieces together, but the pieces are they're breaking apart as he picks them up. to put them into the puzzle. And so he's trying to glue things together, and it's just not a smooth process as he wanted.
The concern here with the left tackle spot, or just offensive tackle in general, as opposed to the wide receiver spot, is that you just straight up don't have any depth. Like if one tackle goes down, you're already working with your swing tackle in Rashad Hill, and you signed him to be your swing tackle, a guy that can just slot in when you need him,
right,
not to be your starter. So again, something to monitor as well. Ali Udo, you're right. You brought him up just a couple minutes ago here too. That is one positive along this offensive line. In my opinion, from all the news that I've read about this group, it's been substandard, right? You look at terms being thrown around, it's a work in progress. It's, they're not quite up to speed. They don't have all their guys yet. It's been somewhat disappointing from this group. The positives being Brian O'Neill, of course, who continues to be the guy. You haven't heard a whole lot about Bradbury or Cleveland. I tend to think that's a positive, but like you'd like to hear a little bit about Bradbury given his past, and Cleveland as well, given that he's never been a full-time starter in the NFL. But Udo has made a lot of headlines. It's not just like the blogger writing about, the guy who's having a nice camp. Like this is national news at this point. That Ali Udo is out there challenging for a starting spot, potentially at two positions, given what's happening with Darisaw right now as well. And we saw the news reports early that he was getting in the mix at guard.
Now, this is the benefit of the Vikings perhaps overdoing it when they target guys that they want to be able to plug in multiple positions. Like I'm always thinking like it's just find a guy that can play a position well and draft that guy, plug him in, but so many times they go after these linemen that they can move around and play guard and play tackle, play center, which is kind of the Ezra Cleveland thing. And apparently Udo is one of these guys though. Like here's the bright side of that is maybe one of these guys turns out well and can go in and be a starter at guard or compete for the job at tackle, So that's the positive, and I like to see that. Now, when it comes time for preseason, well, again, that'll be another evaluation piece, but the Vikings are kind of due for one of these guys to hit and be a consistent player on the offensive line. It's been a while since they've really hit on one. And again, I'm not saying that they've been just hammering the investments in the offensive line for years, but once in a while for a team, a guy like this is a reliable player for a long time. And I think Udo can be that guy that they really haven't had for a while. After they invested in a center in Bradbury, they just drafted Cleveland last year. They got Darisaw now. Like they're making their draft pick investments. Finally, they're starting to do it. But Udo is a guy that, you'd think if any of these guys hit, Udo's not the guy necessarily that comes to mind, but based on camp so far, it seems to be like he could do it.
Yeah. And that would be huge to see for, like we were just saying, a group, a unit that lacks depth, any sort of ascension in any regard. It doesn't need to be Udo, but it sounds like he might be the guy, and that's a big plus for this group. Let's shift momentarily to defense here, catch up on where they're at, and then I want to talk about the kicking situation, and we can get out of here. Defensively, not a whole lot of news out of camp, and I think that's kind of natural, right? Everyone focuses on the offense because it's just inherent to the sport. People focus more offensively, and especially with this group of defensive players. I mean, you've got a ton of veteran guys who you just kind of expect to go in there, do their thing. There's not a whole lot of big news just to be generated in general from this unit. One thing I wanted to touch on, and I actually noticed this watching one of those ridiculous riddle videos where the Vikings players walk up to the camera and read a riddle and are hilarious about it. If you haven't seen them on the Instagram page, I highly recommend it. Cameron Dantzler is making me nervous with his frame. Obviously, he looks super athletic. I think that he's had a pretty solid camp. There have been a couple of plays where he's been on the wrong end of some highlights for some guys, but I'm really nervous about just how skinny this guy is. Coming off of a season where he had a number of injuries, different types of injuries and lingering injuries at that. This guy looks like he can snap him over your knee. And that makes me nervous because if this guy missed almost, close to half the season last year, and he hasn't put on, in my opinion, does not appear to have put on the weight necessary to grind through a 17-game season now, I'm concerned that you're going to need to use Rashad Breeland or Mackenzie Alexander on the outside this year.
Yeah, that's certainly a concern. And then, we actually were, it's funny, we were talking before the show, if we're going to cover the Gladney release, and you're like, it's fine. Everybody, we get the point,
There's nothing more to talk about. Yeah.
There's nothing more to talk about. But from a football standpoint, it's just another depth piece you don't have.
Right.
So from that aspect, and now it sounds like Mackenzie Alexander's been doing well, getting back in the Vikings and the Mike Zimmer defense, being more accepting of that role, kind of in the nickel slot there. But it's just, it's not like a skinny corner can't do it. Richard Sherman wasn't exactly a thick dude,
right?
Or isn't.
And Xavier Rhodes is obviously firsthand. Yeah. Everyone knows what he was able to accomplish.
So it's not like it can't happen. But it's just, you have to be a little bit more. You have to have a little bit more grit if you're the skinny guy at corner playing with these guys like DK Metcalf. So it's another development to watch. And it's the thing is, he exceeded expectations by all means last year.
Absolutely.
When he was on the field. So,
but now he has new expectations. We reset those expectations based off of him upsetting expectations. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with you. But, and then you also have to factor in, with Patrick Peterson there and Breeland and these guys that can help out a little bit more. Maybe, that development can happen. I'm not as concerned about the frame, I guess. It's not like a skinny, like I just said, a skinny player can still succeed. It's just, he's got to kind of find his own way, if you will. Technique has to be a little bit different than maybe he's being taught just by guys that are bigger.
Generally speaking, it just makes me nervous when you're looking at a position that's expected to be physical within the Vikings defense, and the guy isn't physically, he's not an asset physically speaking, right? Like his frame is good. It's long. He's got the length to break up passes and so forth, but press coverage off the line of scrimmage. I'm watching Cameron Dancer this year. That's something I'll keep an eye on. So
fair enough.
On the other side of this, anyone else on defense that stand out to you positively, negatively? It seems from my vantage point, like
I'm excited to watch Neil Hunter again. Tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got kind of more of a chip this year too. He's like talking more. He's got more attitude.
Which is good. Yeah. Which is good because like the way his contract is now set up where he can kind of, if he is on the field and he plays out like a superstar, you see these contracts that these linebackers and pass rushers are getting. He can still, and he's young enough obviously to earn another big payday, a massive one where he could get 25 plus, $1 million in a season.
He might deserve it.
And I think he would if he's healthy enough. Absolutely. But another thing too, I just thought of is along the same line. So it was the Darius Leonard contract is the one I was kind of alluding to. Where these guys are getting absurd money. Eric Kendricks' contract is looking extremely cheap right now for a guy who's probably a top 5 at the minimum, the middle linebacker in the league. $10 million a year for that guy is stealing. So he's another guy maybe going to next year. He might maybe, try and rework that himself. But that's just another thought because that's a star player. Neil Hunter, obviously a star player. Barr's probably on that fringe, but you have Barr, then you have Harrison Smith on the back end. You have players on this team, man. It's just seeing how well this depth, these kind of fringe roster players can keep things up if there's injuries. That's the one thing I'm concerned about this team.
It's funny, just a note on contracts, like NFL contracts are basically all 1-year deals, right?
Well, especially now.
Yeah. It's basically like you could sign a 5-year contract and like, that's great. You might have, guaranteed money for 3 of those years and, some sort of salary bonus.
If you like show out, if you show out that year,
you immediately go back to the negotiation.
Then you're like, all right, no, I got the leverage. If I don't want to show up, give me more money and I'll show up.
There's no middle ground here. It's either you suck and we're going to take your paycheck from you, or you're really good and you're going to demand more money. And that's how it should be. That's how you negotiate in the NFL right now. But like there's no in between. So yeah, that is interesting. I
was it Xavier Howard from the Dolphins who just did that with like 4 years left on his deal?
Yeah,
just
got I got 10 interceptions last year, so I want more money. And hell, they gave it to him. So. Yeah. You should. If you have leverage in the NFL, you should use that because you only can have leverage for about a decade.
Especially now with these teams, it sounds like based on the contracts being given out the Josh Allen one, it looks like they're expecting a pretty solid spike in the cap. So now is the time where if you're both agent, your agent and the front office understand if I'm a player and I have that leverage, if I'm Eric Hendricks, for example, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to try and do this here, and the Vikings do have that cap space left, which might be it might be already happening. These especially with he or Harrison Smith.
All right. So defensive side of the ball covered. Special teams. This is something that I think is already a major red flag, but because of the sideshow that's been going on at camp, we haven't been talking about it as much because generally speaking, no one cares about kickers until they miss a field goal, right?
Yeah.
But we have been, as a fan base, in my experience with you and myself and everyone else, we've been predisposed to be nervous about the kicker position. And this is a situation to me where if you're a good football team, like if you believe this is a playoff football team, you have to be throwing up red flags at the kicker spot right now for the Vikings. Greg Joseph, who is kind of your, I guess your starter to a degree to get it started at camp.
The career is not super promising, and it sounds like it's been shaky for him.
Right.
Riley Patterson's been decent, but like it's in a way it's tough that there's not one emerging, I guess, as sort of the go-to guy. And I like that they're not going after and drafting a guy, but I don't know. It's, I just think back to drafting Daniel Carlson and how that in a way messed things up, even though Carlson has become really, really good. But like what was so wrong with keeping Kai Forbath, because
that's the move that broke the camel's back, really.
Because he was not perfect, but he made the clutch kicks when he had to.
For us.
He made the clutch kicks when he had to, if I remember correctly from 2017.
They're just all inside 50 yards, so everyone was pissed. That was his fatal flaw, is that he could connect from beyond 48 yards or whatever it was. And I think that was a grass is greener situation where the Vikings were like, oh, this is pretty good. Let's see if we can get better. And everything went to shit. And it's kind of been that way since. And I am here to say that, August 9th, I'm nervous about the kicker position moving forward.
Well, and that's just being a Vikings fan. So
I don't know who it's going to be, though. Like, normally, like, you have a general idea. Like, it's like, all right, this is Blair Walsh's job. It's someone else's to take. Or whatever.
There's no.
This isn't like that. This is a true blue kicking competition, and no one's running away with it. No one's doing anything to benefit the organization at the kicking spot right now from the news that I've seen. There's been zero consistency, and that's really all you need from a kicker is consistency. Mm-hmm. And you got zero of that from is there 3 kickers on the roster now? 2 for sure. I mean,
bring back Kari Vedvik.
Don't do that either. I mean, that's just another deal that ruined the Vikings. Like, we haven't even talked about that. That was the first episode of this specific podcast that we did was Kari Vedvik. 5th round pick you traded for a backup kicker. That looks really bad in hindsight. This position sucks. And honestly, we can bitch and complain about this all the time. I'm not going to be able to find a solution. I don't know what to do at the kicker spot because I don't want to draft one. I'm going to get mad if you draft one. I just want you to find one. And I don't know how you do that. The Vikings are just continuously screwed at the kicker position, and this year looks no different. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yep. It's pretty normal.
All right. That being said, now, is there anything else about camp that jumped out to you that you want to highlight before we get out of here?
I did want to highlight just one event that happened. I'm going to bring it up here on my phone. The tweet from Arif Hassan. He's talking about the end of practice today, August 9th. He says Vikings end with a situational drill. First team offense at their own 25 against a mix of second and third team defense. About a minute and 2 timeouts left. So down by 6. So it's a situational thing. Got to come back and win the game. Right. Whatever. Start with a draw play. Classic. Then get a penalty. They still make it all the way to the red zone before not scoring as time runs out. Classic Vikings there. To start with a draw, get the penalty, still make it all the way down where you got the hope, like, hey, they actually could do this. No. I can just see the Vikings losing a game that way this year.
So the kind of the reaction to that tweet is to be like, like, that's so Vikings. It's practice.
It's kind of how they lost to the Cowboys last year, actually.
I was just going to say, like,
better than an interception, I suppose, but
it's practice, but like we've seen it translate to the game so much that like doesn't feel like practice.
Right.
And this year doesn't feel any different. So it's like there's nothing. Sometimes, like in 2009, I think was the last time when I really 2017. You gotta get a sense of like the team is special, right? Like they can overcome anything.
Yeah.
We got that sense in 2017. I got it in 2009. I assume our older generation of listeners got it in 98. This team doesn't have that aura about them. There's nothing special. There might be something special, but for general
Special
purpose,
is
this is not a very
term.
special team. Yeah, it is. But my point being here is that there's nothing special to them, so I'm not expecting them to overcome.
Because even when in 2019, when Kirk made the throw to Thielen to beat the Saints, even then, like that happened, and it was like you still didn't trust this team in the crunch time situations. And even last year, they had a couple of nice wins in crunch time, albeit against terrible teams. But
it's still a talking point for
it's
sure.
It's still, I don't know, and a lot of this, the elephant in the room, we just got to say it. Like it does go back to Kirk Cousins. We still don't trust the guy when it comes down to it, but we're waiting for him to continue to prove us wrong. So some good signs last year. That Bears game was a close game. We needed to pull off a couple of big first downs and did. Panthers game, last minute touchdown, clutch drive against the Jags, I believe. So, it's not like he can't do it. The next part is just consistently trying to put that together against good teams in key games where it matters for this playoff stretch, which is where he's done it before. Saints playoff game, but need to see more of it.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever shake that feeling. That's kind of what I was thinking about while you were saying that, is that like, this isn't just Kirk Cousins. Like he is, of course, the poster child for this issue that the Vikings have.
Yes.
But I don't think there's anyone on the planet that could make this sentiment go away from Vikings fans. Like if we had Patrick Mahomes, I'm going to give this one analogy and then we're going to be done. The Vikings had Patrick Mahomes and last year happened. What happened to Patrick Mahomes? Vikings fans' reaction to that would be a whole lot different than the Chiefs fans. Chiefs fans were like, all right, we got shelled. That was embarrassing. Let's go win the Super Bowl this year. Everyone's on board. Vegas is on board. We're all like, it's going to be Tampa and Kansas City all over again. Now, if the Vikings did that run last year that Kansas City had, dominant offensive team, solid defensive team, went on a run, lost the Super Bowl by 30 points, we would not be thinking about, all right, let's run it back. It's all, we did it again. We screwed this thing up.
Because that's, if you think about it, 2009, when the Vikings had just missed it, I think everybody.
We thought it was coming back.
Yeah, we thought the team was going to run it back. Until 2010, all the talent came back. Even more so, you get Randy Moss in the mix, but you had all the talent back, and then it just basically everything that could have gone wrong did. But like that was the team that was like, okay, yeah, this team can do it. One mistake away from being in the Super Bowl, and they probably win that Super Bowl based on who the opponent was. So I don't know. You just don't feel with this team yet. You feel like, hey, they can make the playoffs. They're not going to win.
I need to see more to get more excited, but right now, not special. That's where I stand. That is August 9th.
Correct.
Things can change, of course, but that's where we're at as of today. All right. So that about rounds out the show for today. I think we covered a lot of ground here, made note of, the most important events going on in training camp. We will continue on with what we've been doing in this kind of methodology. I believe the next time we speak, we will have a football game to discuss. So that's the first time in 4 months or so that we'll have legitimate film evidence to take a look at and see where this team stands and see where some of these guys who, of course, you're not going to see the starters for very long, maybe a series at the most, but we're going to finally get the opportunity for all of us to judge where some of these guys stand on the back end of the roster. And that's exciting times. So looking forward to next episode. As always, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcast. You can look us up on Daily Norseman as well. Our shows, as well as the rest of the Climb in the Pocket team, are posted there. You can leave a comment, drop us a line, whatever you think. We appreciate that stuff. And then make sure to check out what the rest of the team is doing. They're doing video content, audio content, and written content. So you can find all kinds of different stuff over at Climb in the Pocket. So thank you all for listening to us, and we will catch you next week.